Hello, good afternoon, everyone. It's 2:47. We may as well get get starting. Get started. Thank you very much for joining us for the afternoon session. Today we have a pleasure to host in our panel event Dr. Natasha Jankowski from the Academy, and I will let her explain her role there. We are also joined by Cheryl Aschenbach from Academic Senate and Dr. Karen McClendon from Northstate University. The three panelists will address the issue of ensuring equitable learning, or as we know it from a different perspective, the fourth pillar of guided pathways in community colleges in California. And if we perhaps could start with Dr. Jankowski to share her ideas of what it really means from the perspective of assessment of student learning. Thank you again for joining us. Here's the panel. Please don't hesitate to ask questions as they come up. This is not necessarily a lengthy speech or lengthy presentation. We are all in it together. We are here to enjoy the discussion. Dr. Jankowski, please.
Thank you so much, Jarek, and thank you to everyone for joining us for this discussion on ensuring equitable learning. Incredibly important topic any day, but increasingly more so now. So thank you for your willingness to participate and engage in dialogue. I want to reinforce Jarek's point about being a participant in this panel with us. So if you have things that you would like to share, please put some comments on how you think you're going about ensuring equitable learning in the chat. I always love to hear about new practices and processes and thoughts. And so please do feel free to share with each other in that space. But from an assessment perspective, when we get into thinking about ensuring equitable learning, because it's not enough to say, you know, someone's gotten a degree, but have they gotten that learning that's in it? And are we sure that when we got them through, they learned the things that we really wanted and cared the most for them to learn and in their learning environment? Assessment is a huge part of that because it provides signals along the way on where you are in your learning journey. But there's a huge piece in that we can put supports around students to make them feel like a part of the campus, that they're supported. But if I'm running into assignments in my classes, if I'm running into spaces where my learning doesn't count or the way I think I know something isn't visible, we start to get into issues of, do I belong here? Do I really know what I know? And getting into self-doubt and perpetuating some struggles and issues for our students. So from the work that I had done prior at the National Institute for Learning Outcomes Assessment, we spent a lot of time trying to think through with other institutions, what does equitable assessment look like? And some of it is asking really big questions that I would love some of the panelists to chat about. If they so choose, you can also be like, not today, it's Friday. I'm gonna pass on that, that's also okay. But feel free in the chat as well to share your thoughts. But some of it goes into how do we define the learning environment? So what is in that space and what counts as like a learning interaction where assessment might unfold or where we think learning is going. And for some of our student populations, that environment looks different. It might not be the academic classroom. And if we put boundaries around the space of what's in and what's out, we cause some tension for some of our learners. So thinking about who gets to choose the boundaries of learning environment and what's in those boundaries is very important for thinking about ensuring equitable learning. A second piece that's related to that is what counts as evidence. So we get to choose a lot of times as academics how I want my students to be assessed. So I want to see academic writing, let's say. I want a certain amount of references and APA format and critiquing kinds of things. But what's the learning outcome that I'm really going for? What are those competencies that I really want to see? And what are the varied ways that I can open up so that my students can be an equal participant in showing me that learning? So if I really think about it's about showing and making visible to us as faculty members and our students as learners what they know and can do, then how can we think about widening what evidence counts and who gets to determine that evidence? So you got power dynamics, you got who gets to say these things, who gets to verify that that's at a college level, and goes into that as another really interesting conversation that I'm just gonna lay on the table and then walk away from. And really thinking about who else is involved. So what is the role of the student in ensuring equitable learning in terms of feeling support in the classroom, having readings where they can see themselves and participate, but really being able to showcase what they know and can do in assessment, and feel seen. And how can we involve our students in problem solving that with us? So just to do a quick recap, thinking about how we define the learning environment, who gets to choose, how we determine what counts as evidence and who gets to put evidence in and verify it. And then thinking about the role of students in really working with us as partners to ensure our equitable learning are some of the things that we're seeing trending in conversations nationally that we need to push on to keep us moving in a positive direction.
All right, Cheryl from academics from State Academic Senate. Sorry, would you please elaborate on the topic?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Yark. Hi, everybody. Cheryl Aschenbach, Secretary for the Academic Senate, California Community Colleges, and an English professor at Lassen College, and really glad to be joining you all today. Natasha, thank you so much for your comments. I'm sure we'll be able to have a little bit more back and forth in a few minutes. I want to get a couple thoughts out first, though, and that's from the Senate perspective as well as a personal perspective. When we think about ensuring equitable learning, I think more than anything else, we have to start with the entire learning experience. And Natasha set that up by saying, you know, what is the learning environment? But the experience as well. And as faculty, as deliverers or facilitators of instruction, Aisha did a good job this morning, Dr. Lowe, pointing out that assessment really comes after all the other elements of instruction. And so, you know, are we re-examining what we do to deliver and facilitate instruction and what we consider and create within that environment? And hopefully that's with as well as for our students. As Natasha said too, now more than ever, it's critical to look at things from the student lens. And I think we really have to acknowledge, and I'm pretty certain that those of you that are here today have acknowledged this, but we need to get our peers to acknowledge that yesterday's education, our educational experiences are not today's educational experiences. And so it's imperative that we really innovate and think differently about what education should be and how to achieve that. And it can't just be us, and it can't just be us amongst our faculty peers. It has to be in collaboration with students and with a really strong awareness of what it is that students need and how they need to navigate this environment and what supports they need as they do that. I can't talk about equity without talking about our racist structures and just being really aware of that we are all working within a system that we've inherited. And, you know, we may not feel like we know any differently, but it's a responsibility we have to really think about how the existing structures are exacerbated for students of certain groups, particularly racial and socioeconomic groups. And so as we do that, as we think about those lenses, part of ensuring equitable learning and outcomes is doing that deep dive internally and really exploring our own prejudices and biases and you know, intentions as we enter into this environment. And so, you know, taking all of that into consideration, I would say first and foremost, just really thinking about being innovative and redesigning, rethinking what our educational experience for students looks like, for and with students, again, I'll say, and engaging in a whole lot of self-reflection on so many different levels, self-reflection, peer reflection, and then reflection in combination with our students. So that we can get a better understanding of what it is they need and how we might be able to accomplish that. And, you know, we get to add in our lens of what we think the world needs from our students. They get to add in their perception of what the world needs from them. And together we can co-create that for them. But really looking at the need to reflect and be brave enough to grow personally and seek that growth. And to do that sometimes in spaces with colleagues where we're not always confident and comfortable, but it's necessary. And then creating that space for our colleagues as well as for our students, whether it's about learning or whether it's about, you know, broader social topics like race and justice. And so, you know, as faculty doing that ourselves, and then engaging our colleagues in those efforts, engaging our students, and ultimately, you know, trying to lead through example more than anything else. Because if we can really redesign and reimagine what education looks like, we're more likely to end up with those equitable outcomes that we seek.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Cheryl. And finally, there is Dr. Carolyn McClendon from Northstate University. If you could please share some of your thoughts on the topic of ensuring equitable learning, perhaps from your institutional effectiveness perspective.
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, I work with a lot of faculty at my institution on the assessment of student learning. I also work to create new programs that are built on educational effectiveness principles, very learner-centered environments. And the thing that I advocate is outcomes-based assessment. And what that means is that grades are based on SLOs. So what students are able to demonstrate by the end of the course, when we give them as much practice as we can, as much feedback as we can along the way, that creates an equitable learning environment. And the reason for this is that we set very clear expectations. So in writing, we explain to students very clearly what the different performance levels are, what we expect. It's descriptive so that students can understand. It's learner-centered. And when course grades are based on student learning outcomes, this leads to increased transparency because grades are not a mystery, not a crapshoot. Students know what to expect, and it's clear for everyone. Everyone gets that help. The teacher becomes an advocate for the student. The teacher is on the side of the student because all students can achieve in an outcomes-based teaching and learning paradigm. There's no competition for a certain grade. It's not based on a certain number of expected A's or B's or C's. It is all about helping the student get to the next level. What does the student need to learn? What does the student need help with? How do we help get that student to the higher level of performance? And also I'll add that it reduces bias of faculty. We're able to look more objectively at the criteria that we have created and really help the students get to that next level of performance.
I'm sorry, I was just gonna say, I love this and I would love to take this into our discussion time. So sorry, Eric, but Karen, your point connects so nicely with several of the things that Cheryl said as well. When we think about the mixed signals that are inherently built into our system that we send to students, right? So if I get an A in a class, but on a learning outcome where you took an assignment that I didn't even know about and behind the scenes rate me on it and then tell me I'm not good at this, like, I thought I was fine and now I'm moving forward and I can't even engage in a conversation with advising in the same way or make intentional decisions about which courses to take to help me flex the muscles I need to get better in learning outcomes. But if we align that, that what you're getting graded on is actually the learning we want to see, that mixed messages goes away and it makes it not behind the scenes information for us internally, but something that's an active part of the students and their learning. So thank you so much for bringing those together. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And I love what you said about the learning we want to see, because that's a big part of it too. What do we want to see in the learning? What does that look like? What's the right level? Thank you.
Yeah.
If I were to go back for a second to Cheryl's comment, Cheryl, would you please comment on this from your perspective? You said that yesterday's learning or the way we were taught is not really what we should be expecting any longer. Would you say that this alignment or grading based on competency, based on the skill, is that the sign of things to come? Is that something that we need to cherish and explore better?
Absolutely, Yark, and thanks for bringing that up. I think, we've all been in faculty meetings where we've heard, well, I managed to navigate my college experience and survive no matter my background, and my students can too. So that's, we've got to battle that a little bit and shift people away from that thinking and just recognize that the experiences are different today and education needs to be different. Absolutely. How many have graded based primarily on, just really attendance and participating daily in class. And then as Natasha pointed out, like weren't successful on that culminating experience or were successful enough overall that they got the positive grade, but really didn't accomplish the outcomes of the course. And so, designing with outcomes in mind, as Dr. Lowe talked about this morning, as Natasha talks about, to be able to do that then ties learning more clearly to what the student needs to achieve. And it's so critical that we communicate that repeatedly to students and create the links for students and make those links really obvious. Like, hey, we're working on this assignment or you're having this activity because this is what we're going to accomplish from it. And this is how it ties into the outcomes I want you to achieve by the end of the class. And this is how that relates to, university work or career work, and, really creating and making obvious. I think we take for granted the fact that we see many of those links and assume that our students do as well. And most of the time they do not. And so if we can, think more deliberately, design around outcomes, as has talked about already today so much, and then make those outcomes and those links between what we're designing and what they're doing and how they're doing it to the outcomes, it's much more meaningful. And then, as Natasha pointed out, it's transparent.
Just to echo off of that, I think in terms of what's, I'm so sorry, Yark.
No.
Welcome to panel time, everyone.
That's
So what's beautiful about what, well, there's lots of things that are beautiful about what Cheryl was talking about, but particularly thinking about how we have to educate differently, because it's actually about, we have to ensure learning happens, right? Like you could come through and you could just experience college and like, maybe that was okay. But having an understanding, two things that I see that are inherently different about how education is unfolding. One is a holistic picture of our student, that to really be able to support and ensure learning happens, we need to understand what's going on with our students and our student population across the board. Not like, well, you're in college now and you're full-time doing this and your life is nothing else and do all of this work, but there are layers of worth of things happening within your family, within your community, of which education is one. That's one slice of a piece of this puzzle for our students. And when we think about interventions, when we think about learning supports, if we don't have that holistic picture of who our students are, what else is going on with them fully, then we're inhibited as educators to meet them where they are and move them, and bringing in that life experience, bringing in what's going into our classrooms and our learning environments can be helpful to not create so many divides that we put up. So I think that holistic picture is one, but another one is something that's floating around in this conversation between Karen and Cheryl and myself about the role of feedback for both faculty and our students. And so when I think about traditionally how feedback has unfolded, and we know a lot of things in feedback and assessment that's like, if you can't actually do anything with it, it was a waste for me to give it to you and a waste for you to read it. Like you actually have to apply the feedback and engage with it differently and reattempt something in that space. Historically, we give you feedback at the end. We're like, here you go, and then go to your next learning experience. And I, as the next faculty member in your journey, give you the same type of feedback on the same shared struggle. And we're like, why are our students unable to do these things? So thinking about where do we put the timing of feedback in that journey so that our students can actually actively engage with using it. So it becomes feed forward into how they're modifying their approach, and feed forward for our faculty to think about, are the assumptions that I've built about what I think I'm doing here really getting across to our students? So we have a much more open dialogue with our learners on, this is what I'm trying to do. Did you get that? Are we on the same page? What do we need to change in this space to do? And that stance of a dialogue on the learning design is inherently different, I think, than how education's unfolded prior.
And I think to add to that too, Natasha, thank you. That learning design as well as that assessment design, it really calls for repeated, formative, scaffolded opportunities to be authentically assessed and to really experiment with what they're learning, rather than that really high stakes one at the end that leads to exactly the situation you talked about, where they get the feedback as they exit the class. The next instructor has no idea really what that feedback was. They only see a grade, and the instructor and the student has none either. So there's no room for growth. And so really, speaking more towards frequent, low stakes and cumulative type efforts rather than a single summative at the very end, which, again, in some of our disciplines is traditional. And that's where it's necessary for us to really think about how can we break with tradition and be more innovative to the benefit of our students.
And the system that you just summarized, I think it really adds to, again, this constant bumping of skill versus grade, because again, students land in our classrooms, meaning at community colleges, and our faculty say that they are not prepared, and AB 705 discussions are really underscoring those discussions. So now, however, when you think about it, our students who transfer to four-year universities, they are pretty much facing similar discussions when they enter the classrooms. Hey, you've been to community college and you still don't know X, Y, and Z. In other words, it's not the grades or course completion or certificate attainment is what shapes the discussion once students goes to a higher level, right? We receive our students from high school, they are not prepared. We send them to universities, four-year universities, and they are just as much unprepared, or at least that's the perception, simply because, again, the discussion is focused on competency rather than what qualifies you to be here. So that's again, this is what's being repeated throughout the symposium. I heard that during my presentation and right after Dr. Lowe speaking as well. So if you could perhaps address the issue of the system, how could we, what do we do? How we break this? How do we break this chain of really exposing students or really being creating a system where there is just no good way for them to exit this. Students are held accountable to grades, right? We as institutions, we think that we are doing a good job because students are attaining certificates, that they are transitioning. That's what our stress of accountability is on. When it comes to student learning, we are still not there. So what could we do? And I would be grateful for some comments from for faculty and really from the perspective of teaching and learning.
I'm happy to take first stab. And Karen, I want to be mindful because I can't, if you want to ping me at any point and be like, Natasha, shush, I would like to respond, please feel free to do so. I want to make sure that I don't leave you out of this. But I think one of the things that we can think about is making learning visible. So there are certain things that we make very visible that we pass back and forth between our institutions. Grades, one of them, as we think about that, the information about a course in terms of like name and credit information, but we don't make the learning visible. That's not an actual part of what moves with you, but the learning is what comes with the student. And that's what they take with them from one experience to another. And so if we think about the inability of grades to really help us as a faculty member, when I come in and I look at what has been your grade experience prior, that doesn't tell me anything about your learning right now, because to Karen's point, they aren't, connected. They were pushed apart. We can have another conversation about how that happened and the history of assessment and grades. And I'm happy to do that at a different point in time, but they've been separated. And so when we look at grades, we're like, I don't know, but what did you really learn and what can you do? But more importantly, what can you transfer and apply in this context over here? And I think when we really think about system breakdowns, Cheryl talked about that, what do we pass forward? What moves with our student? And how are we helping and constantly telling them, you use this here, you're going to apply this somewhere else. This has value beyond this course. And whether you step out, you move, you have all of these different experiences, what do you do with this learning that you have in another environment, in another setting? And I think if we think about that transference skill that we need to teach our students of how do I apply what I know and can do in different contexts, that's huge. And that's something that we routinely engage on, that it's a team sport. I should get credit for my assist that I passed as I help a student come to your direction. And I might not have been the one that got the basket, but I get points for that assist I did along the way. And so thinking about it in that, changing the currency to be about learning and making that learning portable and visible, I can then make very different decisions about transfer. I can make very different decisions about what supports a student needs in their learning journey. And students can advocate for themselves differently. Our system is very currently internal and helpful for institutional operation structures, but not for student flow and learning structures. So, it only takes us like a year to fix it, I figure. What do you think? No.
We are sure.
That's wonderful what you said about changing the currency to learning. I fully agree with you. And I think that, as you mentioned, grades are an indirect measure of student learning at best, sometimes totally disconnected. And so, the thing that students care about, are grades, because that's what gets them through their academic careers. And so if we put the focus on grades as reflecting student learning, then students suddenly will care about their learning. So I fully agree with you. And I think meeting them where they're at, like you mentioned earlier, meeting them where they are, wherever they are, we can meet them, because we have ways to explain to them how to get to the next step, ways to engage them, ways to make learning active, and ways to help give them formative feedback so that we can help them develop.
Fantastic, thank you. I want to jump in here because we have some activity on the Q&A board. So I'm going to jump ahead. I know we also have another great question here, but it's kind of related. Going back to authentic assessment, how can institutions ensure equitable learning in GE ILOs, and how can institutions create a culture to collect, measure, evaluate, and improve upon those general education institutional learning outcomes.
Such a
I'll
great
take it
question.
quickly first. Or Karen, go ahead. I see you
No,
starting
go
to
ahead.
speak. Go
Go
for
right
it.
ahead. Go ahead. It's
I
fine.
would say to start with, it's got to start with dialogue, because, you know, there's those of us together, we're in this space today having dialogue so that we can look at changing our own practice. Then the question is, how do we change it back on our campuses? It's got to start the same way with dialogue. And again, we've got to save space. We've got to talk about what authentic assessment looks like. We've got to look about, you know, what do outcomes really mean, and how can we reshape our educational institution around them, and start to set that vision. And it's not something, unfortunately, that we can accomplish overnight, but it is important to start to have that dialogue. And I think that's for our GE and our institutional SLOs, as well as our service SLOs, continually applying that student first lens, and really thinking about what do we want our students to learn while they're here and exit with. And you know, getting folks to think. It also continues to mean doing what Natasha talked about and extending what it means to have a learning environment. What are they learning when they're interacting with these other offices on campus or in a work-based learning situation? And so, you know, for us doing the work, it really is about continuing personal growth and then spreading that amongst our colleagues. And, you know, they say it takes two to tango. And so, you know, find that partner to have that conversation and then start extending that and try to model that. And, you know, where possible, try to lead that conversation from within and from above and around if you can.
That is so well said. I'll just say, great, what you just said is wonderful. And wonderful. And I might add, I guess the only thing I would really just add is just to keep reiterating, you know, what you're saying about authentic assessment and how important it is to make it so meaningful. Meaningful not just for faculty, but for students, doing things that they'd be doing naturally as part of this possible career that they're going into, but along the way, what are some authentic, you know, chances that we can measure learning in a way that's meaningful. And I like to call those GE ILOs jellos, so that everyone can get on board with that.
I love it. It also makes me think about, well, several kind of threads that I hear in there is one, using this as a conversation space to get to a consensus or a shared understanding of what we're trying to achieve as a collective, right? And Jellos can be difficult because sometimes they're not owned by people. Sometimes there's some territory turf issues. Sometimes there's budget implications connected to those things. But so when I think about culture of collecting this, is one way to parse it is to consider there are some learning outcomes that are enabler learning outcomes, right? That's like, if you haven't really gotten this skill set down, I can't build on it over here because I'm going to be having you apply that and add this or integrate these two together. And a lot of our Jellos are part of that enabling learning outcome environment. And so if we think about what am I hoping to take or engage and build from, we could start to think differently about the role or the space or what we want to do with that evidence in there. But I think it's also really inherent in the narratives that we talk about what's the value of some of our courses and what's the function of some of these elements within our institutions. And if our narratives about what role these things play doesn't line up with what we're trying to do from a measurement and data collection perspective, you will immediately get some disconnect. Data will go somewhere we don't know about. People aren't going to want to talk about it because it's unclear, and trust is the only way that data gets used to actually get to meaningful change. And if I don't trust in the process or what's going on, I can't meaningfully engage on the betterment for that. And when we talk about equity, there's a lot of spaces there where there's been inherent mistrust for good reasons built into our systems. And so thinking through, again, to Cheryl's point of dialogue, how do we create spaces to talk these things out before we start jumping into process and moving, but ensure that our narratives line up with our practice intentionally.
I really appreciate the conversation that's happening right now, and I wanted to take a moment to introduce another question that we have in the Q&A panel, and then also kind of bring in something that we talked about earlier in the chat about the evidence-based storytelling framework. So one of our attendees is sharing that they're moving away from kind of like general data and starting to disaggregate data and look at different types of identity intersections when they're looking at their assessment metrics. And their question is how do we encourage faculty to adopt practices that will lead to more equitable practices? And I want to kind of add on that, aside from disaggregating the data, I think that's helpful. How do we kind of use that data to create a narrative or story that really better understands our students' holistic experiences?
I'll go ahead. I was trying to work on my pausing ability to make space. I love this question, as I love all of these questions. And I think a short answer is involve students. If you want like a quick, easy thing as you're going away in working in the space. There is, well, prior to that, we don't have clarity on what we're disaggregating. And if there's any hint from a culture that we're going to get things coming back upon us as faculty members, if we're disaggregating, like, you are ineffective at teaching the student population. And now, not that this is a professional development opportunity or a space for growth or what's going on in this course or the course content or the readings or the assessments that's not helping some student populations learn. But if that comes back on me punitively, data disaggregation is a terrifying experience. Faculty also don't want to feel guilt about not being effective. We really care about teaching and being great educators, right? We wouldn't be doing it if we didn't care. And so finding something too where we thought we were being effective when we aren't can be incredibly heartbreaking. And having mechanisms and support in place to engage through those courageous conversations we need to have about, we did not intend harm, but maybe we didn't help some students in the way that we thought we were, is a necessary accompaniment to some data disaggregation conversation. So I think it's not, let's just disaggregate data and take a look at it and see what we learn, but it needs to be this very intentional, structured conversation around what's going on in our practices, our processes, what can we and cannot we do, what's within our control and what is not, and what supports can we put around our faculty as they engage in a data conversation. So that's sort of one piece, but involving students in analyzing that data can be so beneficial because it's their data and they know about it in a way that we never will. And so engaging them and saying, what does this mean? What does this mean to you? How are you interpreting this? What supports do you need to improve? How can we ensure you're learning in a different way? I thought I was trying this, was that not? And it's that student dialogue can be a much less intimidating way to engage in some of that data disaggregation. So involve students, but also have structured, supportive conversations around data disaggregation so that it's not a finger pointing game or a blame and doom sort of situation. Nobody wants that. But to Anthony's question as well on evidence-based storytelling, just briefly, I promise I'll be brief. So evidence-based storytelling is a process that we engaged in and a framework that we put out through the National Institute for Learning Outcomes Assessment. And I'm happy to say next February, there's a paper coming out that pulls all the ideas together. And so if you are not part of the newsletter, join the newsletter. It'll be coming out in the newsletter in February. I have insider knowledge because I was in charge of the newsletter. So I pay this forward to you. But part of it was understanding that what we're really trying to do in assessment and with our data is make evidence-based arguments about how our students that we have, the learning experiences and the support structures we offer them come together to equal increased student learning or equal that we are being accountable. And it's the stories that we tell ourselves about how these pieces fit together intermixed with our students' actual lived experiences. So we aren't telling data stories about how I analyzed the data, what I did to the survey, how I controlled for different things. That's a great data story. Methodologists will be like, oh, I love it. But a student story about the people that are behind this, because these are real people trying to learn and engage in real time with the pieces that we're getting into, but helping us make sense about how do these pieces fit together and who's the audience that we're sharing with this. And we have a lot of internal narratives within our institutions, our programs, ourselves, as our role as faculty members, as our role is to support and interrogating what those narratives, how they fit into a larger story that we tell about our impact and our program and our role in supporting our learners is very crucial to engage with this, but it's also an incredibly effective way that we've seen to engage in data use and think differently about data use. So I will stop that response and I'll throw a link in for everyone and let Cheryl and Karen add their insights or in a different direction, but storytelling, it's beautiful.
Karen, go for it.
Okay, sure. That was wonderful. Again, I don't really have nothing to say listening to the two of you. So I'll just go back to an earlier topic about the space, creating that space, because I think it does relate to how we can create the narratives that we need is giving students that safe space where they can have conversations that are sometimes difficult with us about some of the real issues they're facing. And, for change to happen, we have to be able to get out of our comfort zone as faculty, and we have to be able to get into whatever that space that students are wanting to be in and talk to us about. So before we know something, when you think about transformative learning, we have to not know something. There has to be something that we have to figure out, that concepts have to be muddled or something before they can become clear. So I always think about whenever we want to propel forward in life, I think of the analogy of an arrow. We've got to pull back on that arrow and get that tautness, so that tightness and discomfort and holding that in that space can then propel us forward into change, transformation. So I like the idea of working to create safe spaces for those really difficult, perhaps, conversations where students can really tell us things that matter to them, making it meaningful.
Yes, so they can tell us what matters to them. I think that's important. And I think that starts to address the question that's in the chat from Janine about how do we work with the data while not disenfranchising or looking deficiently at a group. And going back to Natasha's comments too about including students. What do they want their learning to look like? And how may that need to be different? And really listening to that is getting at that more instead of trying to figure out, how do we address deficiencies if we think of it in that way instead. That's not the right framework. I think starting to look a little bit more at not just engaging students in that conversation, but again, to get faculty away from, the hesitancy to disaggregate is, really talk about the stories, give examples in that structured environment of, what conclusions do we draw when we have aggregated data versus how much richer is the conclusion that we can draw and the conversations we can have when we start to disaggregate, and how different those outcomes could look. And again, faculty want to improve things for their students. And so to do that, we need to have those conversations and bringing that forward and not using their own data initially, because that is threatening and people get defensive, but just really looking at the difference in what we can discuss and how we might be able to modify things moving forward when we do disaggregate and have rich conversations. But I really like the idea of including the students in that conversation as well.
I think to add to that, Janine, to your question, ensuring that some of the questions that are asked about the disaggregated data are about institutional structures that are parts of cause and not student blame. So a lot of times we go, oh, well, students, blah, 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 insert whatever kind of piece you want. And we don't think about what are we doing? What structures are we going in? And to Cheryl's earlier comment talking about the racist structures that we have in place that we need to start dismantling, that needs to be a regular question that we ask when we're disaggregating data. Because at first, with any data, we should do no harm. We should not further perpetuate inequities, and we should not build upon existing biases. And I love there's this concept of going assumption hunting in data disaggregation, where in that conversation around our data, we're actually going through and seeing what assumptions are at play about our students and what we think they can and cannot do, and what is that based in? And are there things that we're putting on our students that we shouldn't, or we're thinking about it differently? And we need to have those conversations so they don't play into how we design our assessments, because we go, oh, well, this student group can't do that, but they can do this kinds of conversations. And so I think assumption hunting and ensuring that we have questions that are structurally focused and not student blaming focused are great ways to address some of those issues.
So again, this has been brought up in one of the breakouts, and I've heard that the notion of academic freedom as something that really has to do with it's I suppose designed to empower faculty to feel like they are really in charge of what it is that they do, and they get to do it on their own terms. So when it comes to assessment and student learning outcomes, that seems to be the term that's used to really stifle the discussion on the topic. And I'll just let you speak to this, because again, I know that that's in our circles here in Academic Senate and otherwise has been brought up a number of times, that the minute you start talking about student learning outcomes, well, yeah, that's infringement of our academic freedom, and I certainly don't hear that from your discussion here. So I guess if I were to ask for, again, guidance and help, support for faculty voices in this respect, so that it's a discussion rather than pushback.
Just very quickly, I will throw a resource into the chat. The National Institute for Learning Outcomes Assessment had a paper that was written by a historian of academic freedom, not a background in assessment. He's a historian of academic freedom. And we went to him and we said, tell us what's going on with academic freedom and assessment, and unpack spaces that maybe there is infringement or not, and give us a history over time. And he wrote a wonderful occasional paper about academic freedom and assessment. And I think that is an excellent resource to have in your virtual back pocket anytime you go into these conversations. So that's one. There's also another link I'll throw in that's an occasional paper from leadership of different faculty union groups on the ways in which they were viewing faculty union and assessment. And we asked each of them a series of 3 same questions, and each responded, and we put it all together in a paper. So I'll throw that in as 2 good resources.
Thank you. Excellent. So it looks like our time, unfortunately, is almost up. Any final questions, comments from our planning team, perhaps, or anyone from the audience? This is your last chance to speak. Yes, go ahead, Anthony.
I think I'm looking at the questions, and one of the themes today is really centralizing students, right? And centralizing their experiences and centralizing voices. And I think people are eager to just hear how they might continue to do that. Is there a best practice, or is there a way to kind of begin that journey at our local institutions?
Well, we just had a book come out on it. So I could be like selfish book club. No, we just had a book come out on student-focused assessment that actually has chapters written from people all throughout the United States and the UK, which has been doing a lot of student involvement work as well, and at different levels within a course, thinking about a program across an institution. Yarrick has it. If you want to see it, I am happy to send you pieces of it if there's some particular level at which you're interested in learning. But there's also on the, and I'll add this chat in there too, on the NALOA website, if you go to new to assessment, there's a questions at hand page, and you can sort by involving students. And we pulled together various examples of institutions across there for that as well. So I'll throw that in.
And Natasha's done a great job of calling out specific resources on the NALOA website, but just going to the NALOA website and keeping it in mind is a great place to keep going back to. And if you aren't familiar with their website, I certainly encourage you to become more familiar with it.
Great. So thank you all for this really robust discussion. We're so fortunate to have you come and speak on this and wrap up our day 1. It has been a very eventful, meaningful, memorable day, full of some really great conversations around ensuring equitable learning. So as we wrap up day 1 of 2, we want to let you know, just in case you missed tomorrow's sessions, we highly suggest that you come because we have a great lineup of speakers. Keep these things in mind because this conversation continues after today. Keep in mind, we have Friday SLO talks. Those will be starting up again very soon to keep that conversation going because this work doesn't stop. We also encourage you to join our listserv. That is where we announce our events. Yark is always great about posting resources in there to keep you updated with what's happening in the field and keep us all connected together. And thank you. So keep in mind, please check out your programs. Make sure you are registered for the session tomorrow. It has its own special Zoom link. But I want to thank our panelists again, Dr. Natasha Jankowski, Cheryl Aschenbach, and Dr. Karen McClendon for joining us today and for a wonderful day 1, I think, of this SLO Symposium 2021. So thank you all for attending.
Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
Don't forget your evaluations.